Welcome back, friends. Alright, so in this video we're going to take the file from the last one and we'll learn how to connect it to a web page so we can see what's inside. Alright, so make sure you're at this stage here. This is pretty much where we left off. And open up the XML file that we generated. And what we want to do now is save this under a more meaningful name. So you see over here, hover your mouse over it, over the tab, and it gives you like a very long file name and then .xml. We want to rename that. So I'm going to right click here and then see where it says save. Control+S. Click on that, and from here you can save it under a different name. I'm going to go to see my C drive here and then go to my data folder. This is where I save all of my information, and then just give it a different name. So we'll say here computer info, and we see on the bottom it says save as type. You can leave it as XML and then click save. And notice immediately the file is also renamed in the tab, so it becomes computerinfo.xml, and that's good. It's easy to remember that. If you want to see what it is that you have saved, you can open this up in Notepad. Remember, it's really just some text. That's all it is. So Notepad, I'm using Windows 10. I'm going to type on the bottom here CMD. For command prompt, click on that link. It brings up an old-fashioned, circa 1980s command prompt window. And to navigate through here, you can type cd ... That takes you back a directory. And then cd ... That takes you back another directory. And then to go into the directory where the file is stored, remember I put it in a folder named data on my C drive directly. So now I'll type cd and then data. And if I want to see all the files with a particular extension inside this folder, I type dir, short for directory, star.xml, and it tells me that I have several files with the XML extension. And if you want to open them, type notepad and then the name of the file, so computerinfo.xml. Hit enter and it brings up the file this way. It just confirms that it's nothing but really just some text, you see. And here, there you go. So it looks like this. This is Notepad, an old-fashioned program, but it's still useful for seeing simple text. Let me close it. Alright, so make sure you confirm that you have the file saved in a definite location and you can actually open it and see it. So beyond that now, at the next stage you go into Visual Studio. I'm going to open up Visual Studio. And as we have done throughout the course, you want to create a simple web project and just drag a grid view in and drop it inside the page. So I'm not going to go through that process. We've done this several times by now. Instead, the next stage, remember, we design the table, we output for XML explicit. We have a nice file that contains the XML. And now we're going to bring it into our program here as follows. Right click on website in the Solution Explorer and then go to add an existing item. So Shift Alt A as a key combo if you like those. And we're going to add our file here. So go down to the Windows C drive, go over to the data folder, and then make sure you select the XML document, the first one. And if you have the preview panel enabled, make sure that you're looking at something that looks similar to mine, and then click add. The preview panel, remember, is the panel on the right side, the way I have it here. It shows you what's inside a file. Alright, and now you should have computerinfo.xml added to your project. And if you click on it, it will get opened up like this, you see? And now you might ask, well, is this just academic? No, because look down below, you should have a file called packages.config. If you open it, it's also stored that way. You basically have the parent level packages, and within it, you have a specific package. That should just be there by default because of the project design. So that's an actual use of XML. It even says XML, you see? Let me close that. And if you open web.config, Well, what is that? If you think about it, it's an XML file. See? You've got the configuration, the parent here, and within that you have some additional items like the system web. And within that you have the compilation, then you've got the runtime, and so on. As you can see, XML really is used, even when you make this project. That's why I wanted to go through at least one lesson where I describe it in some detail. And now the next stage here, under the grid, for example, you're going to type the following. Type and search for XML data source. So drag and drop an XML data source. If you don't want to look for it, remember you can just type in the search box here XML. And it will narrow down what you see. Now you can drag and drop in an XML data source. So XML data source right here, that one. And if you hover your mouse over it, there's a tooltip, and the tooltip shows useful information. It says connect to an XML file. That's why it's needed. Okay, I hope you've got that. So now let's connect all the pieces together. So make sure that you click the XML data source tasks and then configure that data source. And configure here simply means connect to the file we have just dragged in. So click on browse, and it's computer info.xml available right there. Click OK. Click OK. So we've got our XML data source connected to the file, and as we did previously, now we have to connect the grid view to the data source. Basic logic, always the same. So click on the grid view tasks and then choose the data source. Switch that to XML data source 1. And when you look at this, it gives you a nice preview. You've got the name and the hard disk name. So here you may want to configure this a little bit. For example, click on edit columns and you want to change the headers perhaps. So go down to selected fields, and on the right side where it says bound field properties, change the header text so it says something more meaningful. Name, maybe you can even say brand, right? Because Toshiba, Dell, and so on, those are brands. And then select the second field in the selected fields panel on the left side on the bottom and change the header text, and maybe change that so it says, for example, hard disk brand. That's more meaningful. And then click OK at the end. And now the header text looks more professional. And as before, we want to confirm everything is working, so we do that by launching the page. So hit Google Chrome over here, give it a little bit of time to load, and then we'll take a look at the underlying structure in the web page. All right, let's take a look at the output here. So first of all, this is small. I'm going to enlarge the view. So remember, usually just do a key combo like that. Control plus, perhaps. It's just a simple table, that's all it is, which means the following. Right-click and go over to View Page Source, or let's do Inspect. So that's Control-Shift-I in Chrome. Control-Shift-I. I'm going to enlarge this panel in the middle that shows right here. I want to do that for a reason. I want to show you how things actually transform. Alright, so again, even with this panel in the middle, you can again hit Control plus to enlarge that view. And it gets nice and big, easy to see. So take a look. Expand this. And again, it can be a bit overwhelming because there seems to be so much information, and there is. But we can still understand it. Take a look. Remember that we had the grid view. And here in HTML, this becomes a table. You see that? That's all it is. And remember the ID, we called it grid view 1. That's the name it's given by default. So here the table has an ID of grid view 1. That's all. So obviously it might be helpful if you rename these things more meaningfully. I don't do that just to save some time, but for you it might be helpful. And if you expand the table node, these are nodes, individual items. Then you've got tbody, expand that. So you've got the whole table. And notice the whole table is highlighted on the left. Then over here, you can now go through the individual rows, you see? So this is the first row. And then again, only one row is highlighted in the table on the left. Then the next row is highlighted, then the next row is highlighted, then the next row is highlighted, you see? So everything is nicely mapped here between what you see and then the underlying HTML. And if you expand a single table row, then you can go into the table header, you see that? And then you can go into the next table header. And then let's take a look at the next one. Collapse this one, expand the next table row, and then you have the TD, you've got the actual cell data, so Toshiba and Seagate. I remember as I move my cursor to the HTML on the left side, everything is also moved accordingly, so it's everything nicely, beautifully synchronized for you. And then you can repeat that for the additional rows. All right, let me close this. And that's it for this one. Thank you so much, friends, and I'll see you in the next one.